Everyone, welcome to historic Lovett Auditorium. We have a very special guest this evening as we restart our presidential lecture series. Our guest tonight has a unique tie to Murray State University. His late father, an alumnus, Hall of Fame athlete, and a decorated World War II fighter pilot. It is my honor to introduce Admiral William H. McRaven, a retired U.S. Navy four-star admiral and former chancellor of the University of Texas system. First, his wife, Mrs. McRaven, Georgianne, is on the front row with my wife, Karen. Let's welcome Mrs. McRaven and thank her for her service to this country and welcome her to Murray State University. During Admiral McRaven's long career in the military, he commanded special operations forces at every level, eventually taking charge of the United States Special Operations Command. His career included combat during Desert Storm and both the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. He commanded the troops that captured Saddam Hussein and rescued Captain Phillips. And Admiral McRaven is credited with developing the plan and leading the Osama bin Laden mission in 2011. As chancellor of the University of Texas system, he led one of the nation's largest and most respected systems of higher education. Admiral McRaven is a recognized national authority on U.S. foreign policy and has advised Presidents George W. Bush and Barack Obama and other leaders on defense issues. He currently serves on the boards of the Council on Foreign Relations, the National Football Foundation, the International Crisis Group, and ConocoPhillips. Admiral Bill McRaven has been recognized for his leadership numerous times. In 2011, he was the first runner-up for Time Magazine's Person of the Year. In 2012, Foreign Policy Magazine named Admiral McRaven one of the nation's top 10 foreign policy experts. In 2014, Politico magazine named Admiral McRaven one of the Politico 50, citing his leadership as instrumental in cutting through Washington bureaucracy. In 2015, he received the Intrepid Freedom Award for his distinguished service in defending the values of democracy. In 2016, Admiral McRaven was named the recipient of the Ambassador Richard Helms Award by the CIA Officers Memorial Foundation. And in 2018, he received the Judge William Webster Award, Distinguished Service Award, for his lifetime of service to the nation. Admiral McRaven graduated from the University of Texas at Austin in 1977 with a degree in journalism and received his master's degree from the Naval Postgraduate School. He is the author of 3 books, including 2 New York Times bestsellers, Make Your Bed, Little Things That Can Change Your Life and Maybe the World, and Sea Stories, My Life in Special Operations. I've read both. They're excellent, and I would highly recommend them to all of you. Importantly, Admiral McRaven is the son of Murray State University alumnus Claude Mac McRaven. Colonel McRaven is a member of our Racer Athletics Hall of Fame. Mac, as he was known by most on campus, he was also nicknamed Bullet Bill and Seabiscuit due to his speed on the football field. He was born in East St. Louis, Illinois, and was raised in Portageville, Missouri. In high school, he lettered in track, baseball, basketball, football, and became a hometown legend. Mac received a scholarship to play football here at Murray State. Colonel McRaven had some impressive years here. During the 1938 season, McRaven secured a future spot in our Hall of Fame. He rang up 9 touchdowns that season, one coming on a 78-yard pass interception. He received honorable mention All-American and made all SIAA and all KIAC teams. During his days here on campus, Colonel McRaven also captained and helped organize the first track program, the first track team. And following graduations, he joined the old Cleveland Rams before they moved to Los Angeles and was a 2-year starting halfback. Colonel McRaven was signed to a, quote, lucrative deal with the Cleveland Rams. He made $100 a game. To supplement this income, he did Wheaties commercials, taught tennis, among other jobs. And Admiral, I know you can hear me, I'm told he was a pretty good poker player too. He volunteered for the Army Air Corps when World War II broke out and became a fighter pilot. Colonel McRaven served his country for 28 years. He retired as an Air Force colonel. Sadly, he passed away in 2007. This evening, we have some photos of Colonel Mac McRaven that I would just like to show you briefly. His freshman year may have been the photo prior to that one. So you can see the resemblance here in just a moment. The next photo is Colonel McRaven. He excelled in all sports. He literally played every sport here during his 4 years on campus. The next slide, of course, I'm not sure you can see it. He's number 36, and he was drafted by the Cleveland Rams. The next slide, he was also a leader on campus. He was president of his junior class, and he was a leader in his class every year during his time. And lastly, this is the Murray State University's 16th commencement in this building. The old auditorium, as it was called, College Auditorium by others, now Lovett Auditorium. His commencement was Thursday morning, June the 1st, 1939. We'll hold it on the next slide. Colonel McRaven was a member of the greatest generation. And Admiral, thank you for your service to our country, and thank you for your father's service to our country. It is an honor to have you here on campus this evening. Please welcome another American hero. Let's give a racer welcome to Admiral Bill McRaven.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, President Jackson. It is great to be here at Murray State. Bob asked me to talk a little bit about Murray State's influence on my father and subsequently on me tonight. But before I do that, let me also recognize, and I've got the lights in my eyes, but I believe my first cousin Sandy Massey and her husband Ward and daughter Brittany are here tonight. So Sandy, thanks for coming so far to be here at this event. My father was her uncle, so I know she will appreciate this as much as I do. And, you know, when President Jackson introduced me, as often happens, people very graciously call me a hero. Well, I'm always a little sensitive about that because I tell folks, look, I wasn't a hero, I was a good officer, and I'm proud to be a good officer. But you do have an American hero in the audience tonight. Warrant Officer Doug England is here. He is, without a doubt, the finest Army aviator of our generation. Doug pulled my fat out of the fire more times than I can think of. He is a multiple recipient of the Silver Star, the Distinguished Flying Cross. He is about to be inducted into the Army Aviation Hall of Fame. There truly are few people of this 9/11 generation that have been as heroic and as courageous as Doug England. And I know Doug is here with his wife, Tina, as well. Doug, please stand up and let us recognize you. So we also have a saying in the special operations community that nothing ruins a good story like an eyewitness. And Doug was eyewitness to a number of these stories. So Doug, I will just ask you, just let it go, you know? So this evening, actually what Bob has asked me to do is kind of talk about my life, and in particular my life in special operations. And the best way I know how to do that, frankly, is through the book that I wrote recently called Sea Stories. And it is kind of, for lack of a better term, I guess, a memoir. I do talk about the bin Laden raid, and I talk about the rescue of Captain Phillips, the capture of Saddam Hussein, and some other stories. But I hope what you find when you read the book is that it really isn't about me, or it shouldn't be. If it is, then I didn't write it very well. It really is about the magnificent soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines that I had an opportunity to work with in my 37 years. It is kind of their story through my eyes. But I'll walk you through some of the chapters that I hope have some meaning, not only to me, but maybe to you as well. So the book starts off, and it is, in fact, the first chapter is entitled The Greatest Generation. The year is 1960. I'm 5 years old, and it is set in Fontainebleau, France. My father is a member of the Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe, SHAPE, and he is stationed in France. And every Friday, the men and the women would gather at the International Officers Club. And of course, the men would all be in the bar, smoking cigarettes and drinking Jim Beam. The women would be somewhere else smoking cigarettes and drinking Jim Beam. But I would periodically be able to make my way into the bar and be able to sit at my father's knee. And he and his fellow fighter pilots were great at telling stories. This generation, this greatest generation, loved to tell stories. And I will tell you, these stories were funny, they were poignant, they were inspiring. Sometimes they were a little unbelievable. But I realized at the time how important the stories were for the men and women of this generation. Remember that this generation were children of World War I. They were children of the Great Depression. All the men went off to World War II, and when they came back, the men and women built the country that we have today. And I think these stories are what allowed them to deal with the challenging times in their life. And I remember later on in my life, my dad said to me at one point in time, he said, "Bill, life is all how you remember it. Life is all how you remember it." And so this is how I remembered my life. The next story is called Operation Volcano. The year is 1967, and we are now stationed at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio. My father was a colonel. He was in charge of base operations. And we lived in a small subsection of the base called Medina. And not far from the base housing, where all the military folks lived, was an ammunition storage depot, a very large ammunition storage depot, about 100 acres of these things called gravel girdies, and they look like little volcanoes. And this held all the ammunition that was preparing to go overseas to fight the Vietnam War. It also had nuclear weapons in the ammunition storage depot. Well, this was the 1960s. And of course, while it was Texas and we loved to play cowboys and Indians, this was also the time of James Bond and The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and I Spy. And so me and a couple of my buddies decided that we were going to do a James Bond-like mission. And what a better mission to do than to break into the ammunition storage depot. So we concocted this plan called Operation Volcano. And we were going to make our way from the base housing down into this dry creek bed. It was about 1.5 miles or so to this insertion point. We had some wood planks that we would lay on top of the fence, climb over the fence. Well, the day of the mission, sure enough, we make our way down into the gully, make our way to the insertion point. We had pre-staged these planks of wood, and we had each brought with us our weapon. And one of my friends had the Red Ryder BB gun. The other guy had a Fess Parker from the Davy Crockett and the Daniel Boone days. It was like a 50 caliber old musket. And I had my Roy Rogers pearl handle cap gun. So we get to the breach point, we lay the planks on top of the wire, and there were these 3 fences. So it was a fairly heavily guarded compound, 3 fences in order to get to where the gravel girdies were. So we lay the plank over, and I climb up and I get over the first fence. Kind of motion to my buddies, okay, come on over. They decided this really wasn't such a good idea. Well, I push a few more planks over, and I get over the second fence, and I'm thinking, this is looking pretty good. And then all hell breaks loose. Then all of a sudden, the alarms are going off. I can hear the cops yelling. The loudspeakers are going. I can hear dogs, so I make my way back over the middle fence. I'm coming to the first fence. I'm making my way back over the first fence. And in doing so, I inadvertently drop my Roy Rogers pearl handle cap gun. It falls deep into the grass. So I make my way over the fence, and we get back into the dry gully, and we make our way, and you can always hear the blaring of the sirens. But then, in a little while, things kind of calm down, and we finally break out of the woods, and it's quiet. Don't hear anything. And I'm thinking, okay, I think this looks good. And this was on a Saturday. So we get back up into the base housing area. Nothing happens. Saturday goes by. Sunday goes by. Nothing happens. Monday goes by. Nothing happens. Well, my dad comes home from work Monday afternoon. And he calls me into the living room, and it's kind of late that afternoon. And he says, Bill, the air police said that a couple of kids tried to break into the ammunition storage depot. Do you know anything about that? And as I said in the book, for the first and last time in my life, I lied to my father. I said, no, sir. He said, okay. So he kissed me goodnight. I gave my mom a hug, and I went in. I took my shower, and I got in my bed. And as I got in my bed and pulled the covers up, there on my nightstand was my Roy Rogers pearl handle cap gun. I talk about my father quite a bit because I like to think what my father learned here at Murray State was so much more than just athletics. He was a remarkable athlete. He had those skills when he got here. But I will tell you what Murray State taught him was kind of how to be a man. And the lessons that he took away, he passed on to me. And he had this great sense of humility. As I was telling some folks earlier this evening, you would have been proud of this graduate because he was a great father. He was a great husband. And I think this little lesson about making sure that I understood without actually forcing the issue was a skill set that he had learned somewhere along the way. So the next chapter is called It's a Wonderful Life. It's a Wonderful Life. It's 1973, and I am a senior in high school. And I am trying to break the school record in the mile. And the school record in the mile was 4 minutes, 32 seconds, 0.7. You never forget these things. And my second to last race, my senior year, I had missed it by 5 seconds. I ran a 4:37, and in the mile, that's like eternity. And so I was kind of down, and the next week comes up, and I go through practice again, and we're 1 day away from my final race as a senior trying to break the school record. And I got home that Thursday night. The race was on a Friday. And my dad says, hey, Bill, you got a call. The coach is on the line for you. And I thought, that's kind of funny. I just left track practice. I'm not sure why the coach would be calling me again. So I go pick up the phone. And I said, yes, sir. And he says, Bill, this is Coach Turnbow. And I'm thinking, Coach Turnbow? Coach Turnbow was a football coach. He was the assistant football coach. I didn't even think Coach Turnbow knew who I was. In the state of Texas, there is football and there is everything else. And track is really kind of at the bottom of the pecking order. You know, we run around in circles. So I don't know why the coach would be calling me. And the coach said, Bill, I understand that you're getting ready to run your final race and you're trying to break the school record. And of course, my heart's beating so hard. I mean, I'm thinking, my gosh, this is Coach Turnbow. I mean, he's calling me. And of course, coaches, when you're 16 years old, 17 years old, they're like, Olympic gods. And he said, Bill, here's all you have to do. You just get out there and you run hard. You run hard and you'll break that record. I said, yes, sir, Coach. Absolutely. Well, the next day I went out, and in fact, I broke the record. And nobody really cared about the record but me. And in fact, a faster kid broke it the next year. But I did care about the record. That record gave me the confidence to go on to SEAL training. That record gave me everything I needed to succeed in life. And I would not have broken that record had it not been a call from a coach. And I call it The Wonderful Life. It's a Wonderful Life, because for those of you that have seen the movie, the Jimmy Stewart movie, you know the point of the movie is that one man, a George Bailey, can have an incredible influence on thousands and thousands of people. And I think back on that call from Coach Turnbow, that one call that encouraged me, that allowed me to break that record, that then I go on to be a SEAL, and then over the course of the next 37 years, by virtue of my rank and position, the number of people that I influenced. And what I leave folks with is, look, you may probably never have a chance to go on a mission to get bin Laden or to rescue a Captain Phillips or to get a Saddam Hussein, but each and every one of you will have the opportunity to influence a young man or woman. Never, ever pass up that opportunity to inspire one. You have no idea of the cascading effect of something as simple as a phone call. So the next chapter is called, it's 1977, and it's called The Only Easy Day. In SEAL training, we say the only easy day was yesterday. The only easy day was yesterday, because you find out going through SEAL training that just when you got through a day, guess what? Tomorrow is going to be harder. So SEAL training, to give you a sense, this is 1977. All of my instructors were Vietnam vets. And SEAL training is 6 months long. It's in Coronado, California. So for those of you that have been to San Diego, Coronado is right across the Coronado Bridge. You got the Hotel del Coronado. You got the Pacific Ocean. You've got the beautiful beach. And of course, if you go through SEAL training, you'll never look at Coronado the same way again, because you spend 6 months in hell. And so the training is broken down into 3 phases. The first phase is 10 weeks long, and there is really a selection phase, and it goes something like this. You get up at the crack of dawn, you do about 2 hours of calisthenics, you get a short break, then you go do a 4-mile soft sand run, then you get a short break, then you go do a 3-mile open ocean swim, then you get a short break, you put a boat on your head, you run to chow, you come back from chow, you'll run an obstacle course, then you get a short break, then you do another couple hours of calisthenics, and then if you have not screwed up in the course of the day, you'll get to go home about 6 o'clock. If you screwed up, you get another 2 hours of calisthenics. And that's the way the day goes for the next 6 months. And throughout the day, the instructors, again, the Vietnam vet instructors, they are trying to make you quit. They want to find out who is going to be tough enough, mentally and physically tough enough, to be a Navy SEAL. And they didn't want you if you weren't going to be tough. So the first 10 weeks is really the most of the physical part. But then in the second 8 weeks, you learn to dive. You learn to dive the scuba rig and what we call the Drager. It's a closed-circuit breathing apparatus. And then in the third phase, another 10 weeks, you'll learn land warfare. Remember, the acronym SEAL stands for sea, air, and land. So you got to be good in the water, you got to be a good parachutist, and you got to be good as an infantryman, if you will. Well, in the 9th week of SEAL training, if training wasn't hard enough, they have a special week called Hell Week. And Hell Week is 6 days of no sleep, constantly being harassed, constantly being kept cold, wet, and miserable. And you do this for 6 days. And it started, our class started with 110 guys. By the time we get to Hell Week, we're at about 55 guys. But if that wasn't hard enough, on the 4th day of Hell Week, you go down to what's called the mud flats. So in San Diego, the water from Tijuana and the water from San Diego merge, and they create this slough area. And so I would say it's about 3 times the size of this stage. And in the middle of the area, the mud is about 4 feet deep. So when you're sitting down, you're literally up to your neck in mud. Well, by this time, of course, you've been 4 days up with no sleep. Your hands are so swollen because you don't think about it, but when you sleep, your hands kind of relax. But you've been moving your hands for 4 days. Your feet are so swollen you can't get them out of your boots. You can barely move. And then you get down there in the mud, and for hours on end, they have you doing mud relays and mud wrestling, and everything is in the mud. And the mud is cold, and it grabs you, and it holds you, and there's a breeze coming off the ocean that's cold. Well, while we were down there, we had committed some egregious violation of the rules. So they had thrown the entire class, at this point in time, 55 guys, in the mud. And we were kind of 3 rows of guys, and we're in the mud. And I remember the instructor, who unfortunately passed away last year, a great guy. But we're all in the mud, and we're just freezing. And we are caked with mud, and all you can see is kind of the whites of people's eyes. And he comes up, and he's kind of on the dry side, and we're all in the mud. And he says, you guys really look like you're hurting. I really feel sorry for you. I know it's been rough. It's been a rough couple days here. And, I tell you what, we got a little fire going over here. And you could all kind of come out and you get warm by the fire. And I think we got some coffee. We've got some coffee we're brewing here. And I think for those of you guys who like hot chocolate, yeah, we got some hot chocolate too. Because, you guys just look like you're having a real tough day. And I feel sorry for you. So I'll tell you what, all you guys, you can all come out of the mud if only 5 of you quit. And that's what they love to do. They were going to pit the class against each other. If only 5 of you quit, then you can all come out of the mud. And so we're lined up in 3 ranks, and the kid next to me says, he doesn't want to be a SEAL anymore. He's starting to head for high ground. And I'm holding him, come on, brother, hold on, hold on. And I'm looking down the line. There are a couple more guys that have decided this is it. They don't want to be SEALs anymore. So they are starting to make their way towards the high ground. And then all of a sudden, a guy at the end of the row starts singing. And I remember the instructor running over going, hey, you, stop singing, stop singing. But he kept singing. Then another guy started singing. And he said, hey, you guys, stop singing. And before long, more guys are singing. Now all the instructors are coming out. They got bullhorns. They're yelling, screaming at us, going, you guys stop singing. You're going to stay in the mud all night. But the singing persisted. Everything in SEAL training had a lesson. And the lesson here was about hope. This one guy, and in fact, it wasn't an officer. It was one of the junior enlisted guys. We all believed that if this one guy, who was up to his neck in mud, if he could sing when he was miserable, when he was up to his neck in mud, cold, wet, miserable, then maybe we could too. All of a sudden, the guys that started heading for high ground, they kind of fell back into formation. We locked arms, and all 55 of us made it through the rest of the night. This lesson about hope. Hope is the most powerful force in the universe. Once again, you won't have an opportunity to go on a raid to get a bin Laden, but you will all have the opportunity to give somebody hope. Never, ever pass that up. A few years later, I graduate from SEAL training, and the next chapter is called The Hand of God, ? It's 1981. I am a lieutenant junior grade, so I'm about 24 years old. We're stationed in the Philippines. My wife and I are stationed in the Philippines. We had a SEAL unit out in the Philippines, and we were doing this big exercise. And every year we would do this exercise called Spec War-X. And we brought in the Australian Special Air Service, the New Zealanders, the Koreans, the Filipinos, the Army Green Beret, the Navy SEALs, and we would have this kind of culmination exercise. And this year, the culmination exercise was a hostage rescue. And I had managed to recruit the senior Marine at Subic Naval Station to be our hostage for the exercise. And he was a colonel named Barney Browse. So I had convinced Colonel Browse to come be our hostage because I wanted to show the Marines how good we SEALs could be. So Colonel Browse, as the chapter opens up, the SEALs are preparing to rescue the hostage. Colonel Browse is in this makeshift house we built. The bad guys are kind of surrounding the house. The SEALs are in the jungle. And of course, as the SEALs begin to move towards the house to rescue the hostage, everything goes south. The SEALs are compromised. They all get kind of killed. The hostage it's a terrible situation. Everything goes bad. And so I'm running the training exercise, and I call the training exercise. I said, stop, stop. It's a disaster. So I pull everybody together, and I said, okay, guys, look, we got to continue on because part of the exercise requires us to make our way from the rifle range where we were through the jungle in a vehicle. We're going to go to the airfield. We had 2 C-130 combat Talons. These are high-speed C-130s. We're going to come in. They were going to pick up the international guys in one aircraft, and they were going to pick up, pick up the SEALs in the other aircraft. Well, because it had been a complete disaster, I come up to the colonel. I said, hey, Colonel, look, the rest of the night is, it's going to be long. We're going to make our way through the jungle. We get on the aircraft. It's 3 hours in the aircraft up and down. Why don't we go ahead and call it? I'll go ahead and take you on home. And he said, no, Mac, let's go ahead and press on. I said, okay, sir. So we move off. The SEALs pass the colonel, the hostage, off to the international guys. We all get in a vehicle. We make our way through the jungle in the vehicle. We get to the airfield. Now we're on the airfield, and we're waiting for the airplanes to come in. It's a blacked-out airfield, so there's no lights. The C-130s are coming in. They're blacked out, but they're late. And, of course, I'm getting embarrassed now. I mean, the colonel, I had hoped that we would impress the colonel with how good we are, and now everything has gone south. So finally, the planes are late, and I realize they're going to be another 15 minutes late, and I turned to the colonel for a second time, and I said, hey, sir, this is obviously not going well. It's going to be a long night. I know you got an early day tomorrow. Why don't we call it? He kind of reluctantly looks at me and he said, no, let's go ahead and press on. I said, okay. So about 15 minutes later, in come the C-130s, and the way they come in, again, their lights are out, and they land, and it's a hot engine on load. So the props are still turning, the heat's blasting out of the engines. So we make our way to the ramp, and all the international guys get on the aircraft, and the colonel and I are the last guys to get on, and I'm right on the ramp, and I said to the colonel, okay, sir, kind of last time here, it's going to be 3 hours of riding in this aircraft. Do you want to do this? Because I know you got an early day tomorrow. And finally he says, yeah, okay, let's call it. So I turned to the load master. I kind of gave him the old, hey, we're heading out. They raised the ramp. We went back to the side of the airfield. I put the colonel in a Jeep. He had a driver take him back to his house. I went back to my house. And half an hour later, the airplane crashed and killed everyone on board but one person. And in your time in the SEAL teams and in special operations, you see this happen a lot, and you wonder, why do some men live and some men die? I'm sure the men in Stray 59, that was the call sign of the aircraft, would have wanted to live. I know their families would have wanted them to have a long life. And you saw it all the time in Iraq and Afghanistan. You turn left down a road, and the guys that turn right get hit by an IED. You have a guy going through the door, he gets shot 27 times and lives, and the third guy in the stack takes one shot and dies. Why does it happen? I'm not sure I know the answer. But what I learned from Stray 59 was I never forgot to ask the question. In the next 35 years, every single time I had a mission that involved a C-130 or an AC-130 or an aircraft, I asked myself the question, are we doing what is right to ensure the safety of that crew? And I can only hope, as I became more and more senior, that lives were saved. Somewhere along the way, because of the sacrifice of the men on Stray 59, lives were saved in Iraq and Afghanistan. And sometimes that's the best you can hope for. Next chapter, 1995. It's called Second Chances. 1995, I am the commanding officer of SEAL Team 3. So this is a fairly prestigious position in your career. It is like being a battalion commander in the Army. So I'm the commanding officer. SEAL Team 3 is in Coronado, California. And the story opens up, and I am holding what's referred to as a captain's mast. So when somebody has screwed up, the military has a very formal proceeding, and I, as the captain, the commanding officer, I'm in full uniform. The individual comes in, and in this case, it was an officer named Jeremy Carter. That's a pseudonym. Lieutenant Carter had gotten a DUI, and so he came in, and for an officer to get a DUI is not a good thing. And I was hard on him. I kind of threw the book at him. And I remember afterwards, the command master chief, the senior enlisted guy in the command, came up to me and he goes, "Wow, sir, you were pretty rough on him. You know that will end his career. Because as an officer, you just can't get a DUI. You can't be found guilty of a DUI." And I realized that. And I remember the master chief saying to me, "Man, maybe you should have given him a second chance." And I thought, I don't know. Well, the next day, I go up from Coronado, California to Central California, a place called Morro Bay. And Morro Bay is a place in Central California, and at the entrance to Morro Bay is something that looks like the Rock of Gibraltar. It's this big, large rock. And as I was driving up and kind of approaching Morro Bay, there had been a storm off the ocean, and the waves coming into Morro Bay were huge. They were 20, 25-foot waves, and they were being funneled in by the bay by this kind of giant rock. So the waves would come, then they'd hit the funnel, and then they would get really large. And I remember thinking, well, we're not going to get out through that surf, because the plan, I was coming to observe a SEAL platoon that was getting ready to go on their final exercise before they deployed. And their exercise, they were going to go from Morro Bay in these two 33-foot rigid hull inflatables, big rubber boats. And they were going to go out through the surf, go down about 50 miles, come back in, go over the beach, conduct this mission over the beach, a training mission, and we would evaluate that, and we determined whether or not they were ready for deployment. So I get in there, and I'm thinking, wow, this isn't going to go too well. So that evening, I kind of bed down. The next morning, I was going to get a chance to go observe the SEALs. Well, I get up in the morning, and as I'm making my way out into the bay, the SEALs are already, kind of doing some training. I see one of the rigid hull inflatable boats, the 33-foot boats, and it's positioned as though it's getting ready to go out through the surf. Now, the boats don't work for me, but I'm the senior officer. So I take a little Zodiac and I go over to the 33-foot boat and I talk to the young lieutenant. I said, son, what are you doing here? And well, sir, we're gonna go out through the surf. And by this time, we're talking 30-foot waves. I said, you're not gonna go out through that surf. He says, yes, sir. He said, we've been trained in this. We were in Alaska and we got this plan. When the surf comes through, we're gonna kind of break around the side. And I said, well, I don't think it's a good idea, but give me a life jacket. I'm going along with you. And he said, well, sir, you don't have a dry suit on. You don't have anything. I mean, if we capsize, I said, well, don't capsize then. So I strap in, and there are a couple other SEALs in the back, and there are, again, 7 guys in the boat. And I'm thinking, okay, let's see, everything's looking good. They need to head off to the corner here. So all of a sudden, the helmsman guns it, and we head 35 miles an hour, and we hit the first wave, and it's a 30-foot wave, and we go straight up this wave, and we are literally airborne for 4 seconds, because I'm in the back going 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. Well, we hit in between the trough of the 2 waves, and the bowman, he falls out. He's thrown out of the boat. And now we're stuck in between these 2 waves, and the next wave is coming. Well, the coxswain does the right thing. He swings the boat around, but he guns it again because he's got to get to the face of the wave before it eats us. Well, he gets to the face of the wave all right, hitting at 35 miles an hour. We go straight up this wave, and this time it's 5 seconds airborne in a 33-foot boat. And I'm counting well, we hit, and now the boat goes dead. A few more guys fall out. We got a couple of broken ribs, and now the wave of the day comes. And it's about a 40-foot wave. And it picks that boat up and just dumps us right on the back. Well, now I am trapped underneath the boat. And I am trapped, and I have this nylon line we call shot line that has somehow gotten wrapped around my neck. I'm unable to breathe. I'm trapped underneath this boat under a 40-foot wave, thinking to myself, so this is how it ends. I had been in the SEAL teams for 15 years. And part of the job is you always have these kind of near-death experiences where you just about something happens, but you manage to get out. But this time, I didn't think I was getting out. I am completely wrapped up. I am completely entangled in shot line. Somebody's weapon is wrapped around me. I'm underneath this boat. I've got no dry suit on. And I say to myself, I will never see Georgianne, Bill, John, or Kelly again. People often ask you, when you're dying, does life move slowly? And the answer is, it did for me there. Everything was moving kind of slowly, and I'm thinking, this is it. And then, and I use the word I think appropriately, miraculously, I am completely freed. Freed of all the entanglement. And I shoot to the surface, but now I'm in the next set of waves, and I'm not gonna make it. And I suddenly hear off to the side somebody screaming and yelling, "Skipper! Skipper!" And I look off to the side, and 2 SEALs are coming at me in a small Zodiac of about a 10-foot Zodiac, and they're making headway towards me, and the next wave is coming. They swerve, pick me up. I don't even get a chance to get in the boat before the next wave comes crashing down, and they manage to pull me out just before the next wave eats us. 7 guys that day went to the hospital. Fortunately, we didn't lose any lives, but we did lose a $500,000 boat. The investigation, which took about another 30 days, showed that while our judgment wasn't great, the expectation sometimes is for us to challenge ourselves, to assume some risk. The 2 SEALs that picked me up that day and 2 other SEALs who rescued another guy received the Navy Marine Corps Medal, which is the highest medal for valor in peacetime. 4 years later, I had the opportunity to be on the promotion board for Lieutenant Jeremy Carter, the young officer. And as I had a chance to brief the board, I was able to convince the board that this officer, in spite of his DUI, was a great officer, and he needed to be promoted. It was one of the first times in the history of the Navy that we have promoted an officer with a DUI. Lieutenant Carter went on years later to serve in Iraq and Afghanistan, where he subsequently saved the lives of a number of SEALs. This is what happens when you give people second chances. And the moral of the story is, once again, you'll have that opportunity to give somebody a second chance. Don't pass it up. 2001, I am now the commander of all the SEALs on the West Coast, referred to as the Commodore. And I'm going out for a routine parachute jump. And the idea was we took one of these C-130s from the local airfield. We come up to 13,000 feet. At 13,000 feet, the ramp comes down. You have what we call a square parachute on your back. You jump out of the back of the airplane. You fall from 13,000 feet down to about 5,500 feet. You wave off. You reach in. You pull your ripcord. A pilot chute comes out of the back of the parachute, and it pulls out the main parachute. You got a big canopy overhead, and you glide beautifully down to Earth. Well, this particular day, we go up to 13,000 feet. The ramp comes down. It is a Chamber of Commerce day, not a cloud in the sky. And a couple guys go out before me, and Jump Master gives me the call, and I go out, and you kind of jump out with your hands out like this. Your feet are behind. I'm falling from 13,000 feet. I'm looking good. I'm nice and stable. I look around. There's a couple guys off to my left over here, about 2 guys off to my left, and there's this one guy off to my right. I'm kind of watching him. I'm watching him. I'm paying attention to him. All of a sudden, this guy's underneath me, and I look at my altimeter, and it's too late. He pulls his parachute, and in relative terms, I'm moving at 120 miles an hour, and he stopped. And I come at 120 miles an hour, and I hit his parachute, and it knocks me out, and I'm dazed from it, not knowing what happened. What I should have done is gotten stable again and then pulled my ripcord, but I don't know what has happened. It's kind of like getting hit by an airbag, I'm assuming. So I'm kind of spinning out of control, falling towards the earth, and the first instinct is reach and pull your ripcord. Well, I reach for my ripcord. I pull it, but because I'm in a downward attitude spinning, the pilot chute comes out, and it wraps around one leg. The risers, another part of the parachute, comes out, and it wraps around another leg. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, this doesn't look too good. Well, the good news is the parachute opened. The bad news is when a parachute opens, it blossoms. One leg went one way, one leg went the other way, and it snapped me in two. Broke my pelvis by 5 inches, fractured my back, ripped all the muscles out of my stomach and my legs, and I landed about 2 miles from the drop zone. And then a lesson I had learned in basic SEAL training came back to me. It was a lesson in the little rubber boat about I don't care whether you are the biggest, the strongest, the fastest, the smartest SEAL, you can't paddle that boat by yourself. And now all of a sudden, here I was, the Commodore, the most kind of important SEAL on the West Coast, and now I'm laid up. I'm in the hospital for weeks. I'm in a wheelchair for a month. My wife, Georgianne, has got to give me the shots to keep me from clotting. My colleagues have got to come by to make sure that my morale is up. The admiral that worked for me was able to make sure I stayed in the Navy. And you realize very quickly that life is about friends and colleagues and the goodwill of strangers. You can't make it through life by yourself. You will need all of these people to help you get through life. It was a great lesson that I had learned in SEAL training, but it came back in spades on that fateful day in 2001. Moving forward, 2003. This is called the Ace of Spades. I'm going to shorten up some of these in the interest of time. But in 2003, we had invaded Iraq in March of 2003. In October of 2003, I am now a one-star admiral, and I get sent out to Iraq. And we have been hunting for Saddam Hussein since March of 2003. I get there in October, and we are on this feverish hunt for Saddam Hussein. And we have this guy called Beacon Boy, and we are always tracking Beacon Boy. Now, in 2003, we didn't have all the drones that we have today. We had a helicopter from the great folks at the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, of which Doug England is part. And it had what we called a Westcam ball. It was an optical ball. And it would kind of fly around, and we'd kind of follow Beacon Boy. And the idea was when Beacon Boy found Saddam, he was going to pull this beacon, and we would then bring the Army Special Operations guys in, and they would capture Saddam. But Beacon Boy never paid out. Well, on December 12th of 2003, that night I had been talking to one of the great non-commissioned officers who was an intelligence non-commissioned officer. And he said he thought he had a lead on Saddam Hussein. And I thought, well, that's interesting, but we've had a lot of these leads. Well, the next day, I get on a C-130, spent a lot of time on C-130s, and I'm flying from Baghdad down to Doha, Qatar, to talk to the 4-star general that's down there. And as I got on the plane that day, somehow the dots began to connect. I got on the plane, and I turned to my aide as soon as we took off, and I said, Hank, this is the day we get Saddam Hussein. Turn the plane around, we got to get back to Baghdad. And Hank was like, I'm sorry, sir, did somebody call you? what are you talking about? I said, Hank, this is the day we get Saddam Hussein. We need to turn the airplane around. Well, we couldn't turn the airplane around because we were in Iraqi airspace, and we had to go all the way to Doha, Qatar. We get another C-130, and we come immediately right back. Well, I get back to our Joint Operations Center where all of our command and control is going on. And I remember the Navy captain that was there kind of gives me that quizzical look. Sir, what are you doing back? I thought you were going to go meet with General Abizaid. I said, don't we have one of our units out on a target? He said, yes, sir. They're out on Wolverine was the name of the target. And as soon as I put on the headset, all of a sudden I hear over the headset, this is in the name now, it was Lieutenant Colonel Bill Coltrip, who was the head of that unit. And I hear the call jackpot. And jackpot is the code word for, we got him. And I'm thinking, did we get Saddam Hussein, or did we get the guy that's going to lead us to Saddam Hussein? So I got on the phone, or I got on the radio with Coltrip, and I said, Billy, is this little jackpot or big jackpot? He said, sir, it's big jackpot. I said, okay, you call me when you get to Tikrit. So they come back, we got on the phone, and I said, Bill, look, I'm about to call everybody in the world, you know? And I got to know before I call General Abizaid and General McChrystal, and they're going to call the President of the United States, is this Saddam Hussein? Did we get him? I said, sir, we did. And so he brings him down about 30 minutes later. Well, now I'm making all these phone calls, and I have pushed Saddam to our little holding facility. So I'm kind of making all the phone calls, and then eventually I go over to the area where Saddam is. And if you recall, Saddam initially had this big beard. And so I thought, well, we're going to have to get pictures of Saddam to show the Iraqi people that it's truly him, so we need to get him cleaned up. Well, there was another 3-star general there, an Army general that had showed up. And I remember I turned to one of my great Army Rangers and I said, okay, let's get him cleaned up, get him shaved and everything. And the general turns to me and he says, Bill, I don't know. Do we have authority to shave him? I said, sir, we had authority to kill him. I think we have authority to shave him. If he had been a threat, we had authority. And he said, yeah, I guess so. So I go back to make some more phone calls. I come back a few minutes later thinking that, you know, somehow the Rangers would have, you know, held him down a little bit as they were. But no, Saddam's got a pair of scissors in his hand, clipping his beard off. I said, no, let me have those scissors back. So I got the scissors back and we got him cleaned up. But an interesting thing happened, or I noticed an interesting thing. So the next day, for those of you that might remember, there was a big kind of press conference. We got him. Ambassador Bremer comes to visit. And I noticed that when the Iraqis came to visit, Saddam was still arrogant and he was pompous. And I decided, that's it, nobody else comes to visit him. So I held on to him for 30 days. And I made sure, I mean, we treated him well. We treated him, frankly, as good as we treated anybody else. But it was interesting. When visitors didn't come, and he no longer had his generals, he no longer had his handmaidens, and he no longer had his palaces, he just became a pathetic old man. And I said, you know, you contrast that with a Nelson Mandela, who spent almost 28 years incarcerated. And because Mandela had this great strength of character, this great integrity, Mandela comes out after 28 years being incarcerated, probably as strong or maybe stronger than when he went in. Saddam Hussein, because he was evil to the core, really kind of collapsed in about 10 days and just kind of became a pathetic old man. And it was really a lesson about how to stand up to bullies. But it was also, for me, a reflection about the war in Iraq. And I had to ask in this chapter, because I'm asked often, was the war in Iraq worth it? And I don't know. But what I offered to a non-commissioned officer that asked me the question one time, I said, you know, every night we were going out and we were trying to stop suicide bombers from blowing up markets in downtown Baghdad. I said, we had to do our job, because what you don't know is if we go out one day and we stop a suicide bomber from killing 100 Iraqis, who were among those 100 Iraqis? Was one of those Iraqis going to find the cure for cancer? Was one of them going to find sustainable energy? Was one of them going to be the next prime minister of Iraq? You don't know. And so you have to content yourself with knowing that you are doing the best job you can under the circumstances. Was the war in Iraq worth it? I don't know. But I hope so, or I hope some of the people we saved will find their place in history over time. Now we move on to May of 2011. Neptune Spear. This was the mission to get bin Laden. So in December of 2010, I'm in Afghanistan, and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Mike Mullen, comes to Afghanistan, and he would come often. And he calls me up to my office and he says, Bill, look, he says, the CIA got a hold of me, and they think they have a lead on bin Laden. And they may call you to come back and talk to them about how it might be done. I said, okay, sir, happy to go back. But candidly, I was a little dismissive because we had a lot of leads on bin Laden since 9/11. I mean, bin Laden was in the Tora Bora, bin Laden was in the Hindu Kush up in northern Afghanistan, bin Laden was in Iraq, he was in Iran, he was like trying to find Waldo. I mean, bin Laden was everywhere. And we were charged with kind of tracking down all those leads, and all the leads ended up always being down a rabbit hole. But about 3 weeks later, I get a call from the vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, says, hey, you need to come back to Langley and talk to the CIA. So I go back to CIA headquarters, and the deputy director, Michael Morrell, gets together with me, and he shows me a picture of the compound. And if you've seen the picture of the compound before, it's this kind of trapezoid-shaped compound. It's got a 3-story building in kind of the center of the compound. It's divided by a driveway. There's a part of the compound that is kind of shielded off from the rest of the compound. There are a couple other smaller buildings. You've got 12-foot-high walls surrounding the entire compound. The walls are probably 4 foot thick. And then there's an 18-foot-high wall in an area that looks towards the south. I looked at the compound, and he said, look, if your guys had to take down this compound, how would you do it? I said, it's a compound. It's what we do every night. We were doing about 25 missions a night in Iraq, and we were doing about 10 to 12 missions a night in Afghanistan. And to give you an idea of what your average mission is like in Afghanistan, you get 50 or 60 SEALs or Rangers or Delta Force operators. You put them on 4 or 5 helicopters. You go from a forward operating base. You fly for about an hour. You land in what we call an offset location. You're maybe 10, 15 kilometers from the target so the bad guys don't hear you. You get off the helicopters. You foot patrol. You march essentially in line through bad guy country. You get to the compound you're going to where the enemy is. You surround the compound. The Rangers set up blocking positions so the compound can't get reinforced. The snipers get up on the walls. They look down into the compound, and then, believe it or not, we'll break out a bullhorn and say, come out with your hands up. That rarely works, but we feel obliged to do that. When that doesn't work, things tend to get a little sporty. We get the bad guy, we take him back, put him on a helicopter, and we fly back. That's what the Special Operations Forces were doing 10 to 12 times a night in 2010. So I looked at this compound and I said, it's a little bigger than what we're used to, but it's a compound. And Morrell said, well, thanks very much, appreciate it. I thought, I came all the way back to Washington for this. So I got on an airplane and head back to Afghanistan. I'm back in Afghanistan a couple of weeks. I'm told, you need to come back. Well, this time I come back and they start to fill me in on all the detailed intelligence. And in the compound, there was this courtyard. And the CIA had found this guy, and they referred to him as the Pacer. And the Pacer would walk around the compound every day around noon for about an hour. There were always a couple of kids who were with him. And we knew on the compound there were 20 or 30 women and children. So he was not alone on the compound. And we began to look at this, and this will go down as one of the greatest, I think, intelligence operations in the history of the CIA. But for all of the intelligence we had technical intelligence and overhead intelligence and human intelligence, we just couldn't determine whether or not this was bin Laden. Well, in either late January or early February, I started having meetings with the president and and a very small group. We had cordoned it off, what we referred to as the bigot list, to make sure that nobody could come on. So it was the president, the vice president would show up, excuse me, Secretary Clinton, Secretary Gates, who was Secretary of Defense, Mike Mullen, who was chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Jim Clapper, who was director of national intelligence, Leon Panetta, who was the director of CIA, John Brennan, who was at the White House, myself, and 1 or 2 others. So a small group. And every single time we would have this meeting, the president would turn to the director of the CIA, Leon Panetta, and say, well, Leon, what do you think? Is it bin Laden? And every time, Director Panetta would say, well, Mr. President, we think it's bin Laden, but we just don't know. And, there were some at the CIA that were 100% convinced it was bin Laden, and there were an equal number at CIA that were 100% convinced it wasn't bin Laden. Well, we had a number of plans. There was a massive bombing plan to just take out the whole compound. The president completely dismissed that early on because obviously he didn't want to kill any women and children. We had a more surgical bombing plan, same problem. We were going to end up killing innocent civilians if we did that. So, the plan that seemed to be gravitating towards was the raid by the SEALs and the great helicopter pilots from the 160th. But as we went through each one of these meetings, we would always have this conversation. And finally, the second to the last meeting I was in, the last meeting I was in was in the end of April, this is about the middle of April, the President turns to the director of the National Counterterrorism Center, Mike Leiter, and he says, Mike, I want you to review CIA's intelligence and tell me whether or not you think it's good. So in the last meeting I'm in, which I think was the last day of April, the meeting starts off and the President turns to Director Leiter and he says, well, Mike, what do you think? Is it bin Laden or not? And he says, well, Mr. President, we've reviewed CIA's intelligence, and we think the chance that it's bin Laden is anywhere between 60% and 40%. And when he said 40%, I'm thinking, well, this mission's over. Who in the world would authorize 24 SEALs and a couple of helicopters to fly 162 miles from Afghanistan into Pakistan, into a suburban area in Pakistan, a compound that was about 3 or 4 miles from their West Point, about 3 or 4 miles from a major infantry battalion, about a mile from a police station? Oh, by the way, the Pakistanis have nuclear weapons. Who would authorize that? Well, I told the President in that last meeting, I said, Mr. President, I got to head to Afghanistan. If you make the decision to go, I'll be there. We'll be ready to go. If you make the decision not to go, not a problem. We're a lot of bad guys in Afghanistan. We'll just kind of continue on with business. So I leave on a Wednesday. I get to Afghanistan, I think, early Friday morning. Friday afternoon, I get a call from the director of CIA, Leon Panetta, and he says, Bill, the President's made the decision to go. And I remember thinking, wow, that is a bold decision. And I've told folks, look, I don't care what side of the political aisle you're on. One, in my time in all of those meetings, never once did we talk about politics. We always talked about doing what was right for the country. It was that's not to say that there weren't heated discussions. There were, but there was no rancor. There was never anything personal. It was always about doing what was right. And so I told folks, I said, when you think back on all of the intelligence we had, and at best it was 50-50 for the President to make that decision, I think it will go down as one of the boldest decisions in the modern era. Well, the next day, the President calls me in Afghanistan, and he says, well, Bill, what do you think? I said, well, Mr. President, if he's there, we'll get him. If not, we'll come home. The problem with the if not, we'll come home scenario, which I had told the President, was, look, as soon as the SEALs get on the ground there in that compound, if somebody comes out with a gun, it's not going to go too well for that guy. And a lot of people in Afghanistan and Pakistan, they carry guns. I said, as they start to sweep through the compound, they get on the first floor. If there's another guy with a gun, and they kill him, and they get to the second floor, and there's another guy with a gun, they kill him, and they get to the third floor, and they kill somebody else, and they get there, and the guy they thought was bin Laden is nobody but a tall Pakistani. This will be a disaster of epic proportions. I didn't tell the President that, but he understood that. He understood the risks he was taking. Of course, he made the decision, and as we took off, everything went fine for the first 162 miles. Of course, as the helicopter was coming in, for those of you that have seen that before, the helicopter came in as I'm watching it on the screen. One of the things we had not been able to do, we had built a mock-up, but the mock-up was a chain link fence. What happened here was when the helicopter came in, that 18-foot high concrete wall I was referring to, the downblast from the helo blades hit that wall, created a bit of a vortex over the top of the helicopter, lost lift, and when it lost lift, it careened into what we refer to as the animal pen. Now, a lot has been made about, well, you seem pretty calm when all that happened. Well, one, I'm listening on the headsets. I know the guys are okay. Hard landing, but I know they're prepared to move on. And of course, we went from plan A to plan B and plan C, and great folks came in and, again, kind of saved our tail. About 15 minutes into the mission or so, I get a call from the ground force commander, for God and country, Geronimo, Geronimo, Geronimo. And Geronimo was the code word for bin Laden. And I passed that on to Leon Panetta, who passed it on to the President. And then it occurred to me, I didn't ask whether bin Laden was dead or whether we'd captured him, because this was not a kill-only mission. So I had to go back and say, EKIA, meaning enemy killed in action. And no, I got the word enemy killed in action. Well, we had only planned to be on target for 30 minutes. But soon after they got on target, I get the call, hey, we've got a whole bunch of intelligence on the second floor. And the ground force commander requested permission to stay there. I gave permission, but I got to tell you, I started getting a little antsy. At about 45 minutes, I said, boys, wrap it up. We got to get out of here. And I think we were on target 48 minutes. And away we went. Guys got back up. We had to refuel on the way back. And as we're coming back across, of course, now, we've gotten out of Pakistani airspace. And the president is now on the video teleconference. And he says to me, he says, well, Bill, do you know whether or not it's bin Laden? I said, sir, I don't. I need to go visually identify the remains, and then I'll let you know. So the airfield was just a few minutes from where my little makeshift command headquarters was. So I drive over to the airfield, and I'm on the airfield, and the SEALs have just landed, and they bring the remains out. Without getting too graphic, it's in a rubberized body bag, and so they place the body bag on the floor of the hangar. So I got down and I unzipped the body bag, and I'm looking at him, and he doesn't look too good. Obviously, he's taken a couple rounds in his head, and the beard's a little shorter than what you're used to seeing. But I was pretty sure it was bin Laden. But I unzipped the body bag all the way, and I'm pulling the remains of bin Laden out because I know bin Laden's 6'4". Well, I'm 6'2", and I thought, well, I'm 6'2". I'll figure out whether the remains are in fact 6'4". But I thought it would be a little bit unseemly for the Admiral to lie down next to the remains. So I saw some young SEAL over there. I said, hey, son, how tall are you? He says, sir, I'm 6'2". I said, good, come here. He said, what? I said, come here, lie down. So he lies down next to the remains, and the remains were a couple inches longer. And I said, okay, thanks. So I go back to the video teleconference, and I'm on the video teleconference with the president, and he says, well, what do you think? And I said, well, sir, we really need kind of DNA, and we're taking DNA samples. I said, but, pretty sure it's him. I mean, it looks like him. Beard's a little short. And I said, oh, by the way, I said, I had some SEAL who was 6'2" lie down next to him, and the remains were a couple inches longer. And there's this pause on the other end of the video. And it had been a very serious night with serious implications. But the president turns and he says, okay, Bill, let me get this straight. We had $60 million for a helicopter, and you didn't have $10 for a tape measure? So a couple days later, I get back to Washington, D.C. I'm up on Capitol Hill. I'm testifying, and my aide gets called and says, the president would like to see you over in the Oval Office. So we go over to the Oval Office and walk in. The president says, hey, congratulations. This is great. He says, oh, by the way, I got something for you. So he reaches around behind the presidential desk and he hands me a plaque. And on the plaque is a brass plate that says, from the President of the United States, Barack Obama, to Vice Admiral Bill McRaven, if we have $60 million for a helicopter, we ought to have $10 for a tape measure. Next time, take the tape measure. And on the plaque is a Home Depot tape measure. But at the end of the day, I'm often asked about the mission. And once again, as the face of this, I have gotten all the accolades, but let me tell you, I was one very, very small part of this. The helicopter pilots and not only the pilots, the air crews, the SEALs, but the intelligence professionals. I mean, it took hundreds and hundreds of people to pull this together. And hopefully, while it didn't stop the war on terrorism, we knew it wouldn't. The fact of the matter is there was a lot of information within the intelligence that we gathered that we think probably stopped subsequent attacks. Bin Laden turned out to be a lot more operationally engaged than we thought. Let me just touch on two more quick things. And Bob, I can't see you, but I know you'll give me the hook here. So the next story, the next chapter is called The Next Greatest Generation, The Next Greatest Generation. And in it, I talk about kind of two soldiers and a SEAL that I had a chance to meet. But I'll just tell you one quick story. So when I was the commander of U.S. Special Operations Command, so now I have the beginning of the book, of course, I'm an ensign, and then I am now a 4-star admiral in charge of all of U.S. Special Operations, 72,000 men and women spread out all across the globe. And I was stationed down in Tampa, Florida. And about every month I would go up to Walter Reed Army Hospital up in Bethesda, Maryland to visit the guys who were coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. And Walter Reed is where we sent some of our most seriously injured, particularly the amputees. And so I would go up and I'd visit the guys, and again, they were Rangers or SEALs or Delta Force operators. They were, or Army Green Berets, the guys who were working for me. And I knew how to talk to my guys. And this particular day I went up and I'm talking to some of the guys, and again, they were blast victims. A couple of guys had lost legs and arms. But, you know, I knew what unit they were from. In some cases, I knew who the kids were. I knew what football team they were cheering for, you know, and so I could harass them a little bit and we could have a good conversation. I knew how to talk to the guys. Well, as I get through with that, the sergeant major who is escorting me around says, "Hey, sir, there's somebody else here we'd like you to talk to." He's not a special operations guy. He's a guy from the 25th Infantry Division. He is also a quadruple amputee. A quadruple amputee. He had been a soldier in Iraq, and the vehicle he was in was hit by an explosively formed projectile, essentially a rocket that hit the vehicle, killed everybody in the vehicle, blew his legs off, all of one arm and most of the other arm. And I said, absolutely, I'll be happy to go talk to the young man. So I go up to the second floor, and this was, again, Walter Reed. They had this great rehabilitation center. And I go up to see the kid, and of course, he's only this tall, because he has no legs. And he's on his, what we refer to as his shorties. So before they give you the long prosthetics, they start you on your shorties to get your balance. So I go over to talk to him, and I kneel down on one knee so we're eye to eye. And I'm struggling with what to say to the young man. I mean, I knew what to say to my guys, but what do you tell a young guy like this who seems to have lost everything? And he must have seen something in my eyes, pity, remorse, I'm not sure what. And he turns to me and he says, "Sir, I'm 24 years old. I'm gonna be just fine. I'm 24 years old. I'm gonna be just fine." I never forgot that. And when I think about the people that I influenced, the 72,000 men and women, and the hundreds of thousands that they influenced, that one young man, Brendan Morocco, you can pull him up on Google. Brendan Morocco had such a powerful influence on me. And I've told folks, I said, you know, when you think about the millennials and the Gen X or Gen Z, I am their biggest fan. And this whole narrative that somehow the millennials are these pampered, entitled little snowflakes, I'm quick to point out that you've never seen them in a firefight in Afghanistan, or you've never seen them trying to go to school in the University of Texas system, hoping to make a better life for themselves. This generation is, in fact, the next greatest generation. They're not like my generation. And for those of you out in the audience that are mine, they're not like us. Their music is different, their eyes, but I got to tell you, they are hard workers. They are patriotic, just as patriotic as their parents and grandparents before them. They want to get things done. They are entrepreneurial. They have this great sense of friendship. They believe in their friends. They believe in making things happen. So whenever I feel like we're having a bad day, I just think about this generation and how well they are going to do for this country. And finally, the last chapter of the book is called The Final Salute. And it really is my retirement ceremony. And so whenever you're getting ready to retire after 37 years, you have a chance to really reflect on your whole life. And so in the chapter, I talk about reflecting on my 37 years. And I thought, what a remarkable run it had been. I've been to 90 different countries. I've met with presidents and kings and prime ministers and tyrants and terrorists. I've been shot at, IED'd, mortared. I've crashed in a boat, in a helicopter, in a parachute, and lived to tell about it. It has been a remarkable journey. It was a little bit like this kind of cosmic journey when you're looking back on things. But I learned a lot in reflection. And in reflection, I found that in my time in the military, I have seen absolutely the worst of mankind. The Al-Qaeda torture houses in Fallujah and Ramadi are so horrible, it is just hard to even mention them. You can't imagine how one man can be so cruel to someone else. The Taliban that would come in and butcher the village elders and kill the women and the children. You wonder, how can we do that? But as bad as it is, I have also seen the very best of humanity. Unwavering love and kindness in some of the most challenging times. And what I learned was, man is worthy of this world. as bad as we are at times, man is worthy of this world. As I finish up the book, I tell one final story. For those of you that might have seen the movie Saving Private Ryan, there's this great scene in the movie Saving Private Ryan, and for those of you that haven't seen it, Tom Hanks plays this guy, and it's during World War II. They have landed at Normandy, and the general has given Tom Hanks the direction to go find this Private Ryan, who is deep behind enemy lines, because Ryan's brother has been killed, maybe two brothers have been killed, and they don't want to lose the third brother. So Tom Hanks and this band of guys makes their way through German lines to rescue Private Ryan, played by Matt Damon. And of course, as the movie goes on, Hanks finally gets to Matt Damon. He saves Private Ryan, and of course, in doing so, Tom Hanks is killed in the movie. So at the end of the movie, Private Ryan, now an old man, comes back to the beaches of Normandy, and there's this great scene. He is looking for the headstone of the man that saved his life. And he's kind of going up and down the beaches of Normandy, and for those of you that have been there, it is a powerful, powerful symbol of the sacrifice of those that landed at Normandy and that fought their way across Europe. Finally, he finds the tombstone, and his wife is with him, and he is overwhelmed by seeing the name on the tombstone, and he almost collapses. And he turns to his wife and says, "Have I been a good man? Have I been a good man?" And you realize in life, that's all that really matters. Whether you are a good man or a good woman, the bin Ladens, the Saddam Husseins, the rescue of the Captain Phillips, none of that really matters. What matters as you go through life is, are you taking care of other people? Are you being a good man or a good woman to the people around you? And finally, I leave the reader with one final quote. It is a quote that says, "Life is either a daring adventure or nothing," by Helen Keller. Life is either a daring adventure or nothing. Well, I was fortunate that my life was a daring adventure, and it sure has been something. So I thank you for inviting me here tonight. This has been terrific. And I think we have time for some Q&A. So again, thank you very much for inviting me here tonight. Thank you. I'm afraid we will have to lower the house lights because I cannot see. So if you have a microphone in your hand, please ask a question. Or don't leave me up here standing all alone. Yes, please. The question is, what was the song they were singing? I'm afraid I will have to take that to my grave. It was not politically correct then. It is certainly not politically correct today. Other questions, please. Nothing?
Okay.
Oh, yes. I've got a hand raised over here, please.
Admiral?
Please, go ahead.
I have a question for you, sir.
Fire away.
Do you have a personal political aspiration? And if so, what is the timing and the plan of how it will unfold?
Yeah, so tonight was the night I was going to announce all that. Thanks for asking. No, I have, I don't particularly care for politics. I do like policy. And I've told folks, one, I wouldn't be a very good politician. I'm a little too blunt sometimes. But policy I do like. And if the right administration came along and I had an opportunity to serve back in government in a policy position, I would welcome that opportunity.
Okay, I've got a question. In recent years, China...
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you?
Okay. I don't think this microphone's working very well, but in recent years... Oh, here it is. In recent years, China has been building and fortifying artificial islands in the South China Sea. in what they call the 9-dash line. Could you comment on the dangers and the importance of that area?
Yeah, so the South China Sea, the Spratly Islands, which is what you're referring to, is an important and a strategic area. It's important and strategic because, of course, as the shipping traffic, particularly the maritime traffic moving goods and services, will move along that line to the Straits of Malacca. So I'm not overly concerned about the Chinese building up those islands. I mean, we need to pay attention to it. The bigger issue really for us is dominance within the Pacific. So when we think about the military, we think about carrier battle groups. When we think about the Navy really kind of works the Pacific. And we talk about our ability to project power as a function of our carrier battle groups. The U.S. military has 11 carrier battle groups, the Navy does. And a carrier battle group is an aircraft carrier that carries, anywhere between 60 and 90 airplanes. It's got destroyers with it and cruisers with it, and it'll have a submarine with it. It may have an amphibious ready group. The fact of the matter is, however, when we talk about 11 carrier battle groups, if you do Navy math, sometimes that carrier's got to be in repair, sometimes it's training. So out of the 11 carrier battle groups, you get 4 maybe that we can deploy globally. The Chinese don't worry about the Mediterranean. The Chinese don't worry about the Persian Gulf. The Chinese only worry about the South China Sea, the East China Sea, the Sea of Japan. That's where they want to dominate. And so to the Chinese, while their military is not near as sophisticated as ours, quantity has a quality all its own. So the Chinese are beginning to build carrier battle groups. They're trying to build 6 carriers. I think they're on number 2. But they're building a lot of little ships. And what they want to be able to do is to dominate the Pacific. So if we don't start focusing more energy on building up our naval forces, building our alliances in the Pacific with the Filipinos, the Thais, the Singapores, the Koreans, build those relationships, we're going to have trouble standing up to China in the future. I'm not worried about us going to a shooting battle with China. The Chinese don't want that. We don't want that. But China's ability to influence the Pacific Ocean, which is half of the world trade, I think it's something we do need to worry about. And the good news is the U.S. military and the U.S. Navy in particular are in fact worrying about it. Please.
Speaking into this? Okay.
Good evening.
Murray State University. I had a question about the Middle East. A few weeks ago, President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu announced a comprehensive plan for peace in the Middle East. Abu Mazen has completely rejected it, and it seems that we're back at a stalemate. What do you think are some elements that could be suggested for an even-handed Middle East peace policy that would encourage a 2-state solution and some semblance of stability there?
Yeah, well, the first thing you have to do is bring the Palestinians in on the discussion. So, and of course, that didn't happen. So when you take a look, and you obviously know this, but when you take a look back at what Jimmy Carter did and the Wye River and all the sorts of efforts that we put into trying to broker a peace in the Middle East, all the players had to come to the table. So this idea that somehow we can broker a peace and have a 2-state solution or a unified solution between Jerusalem or between Israel and the Palestinians, it isn't going to happen unless the Palestinians are at the table with us. I don't know the answer on how you get to a 2-state solution. I do believe that that is the approach we need to take. We need to figure out how to deal with the Palestinians in a way that is a win-win for everybody. It's really complicated, or somebody would have solved it by now, but you're not going to solve it unless you bring the Palestinians to the table and give them an equal voice as you do the Israelis. I think I'm told I've got time for one more question. Do I have a student? Is there a student here who is, so if there's a student, please.
Yes, sir, right here.
Go right ahead.
I want to know, what was it like capturing Osama, like how did it make you feel?
Yeah, the question was, capturing or killing bin Laden, how did it make me feel? I'm asked that question a lot, and candidly, as the mission was going on, there wasn't a whole lot of hoopla. I mean, when I got the word that we had Geronimo, we still had guys on the ground, so I was more concerned about getting the mission done. And when the guys came back, there was relief that the guys were safe. But candidly, I didn't internalize the impact of the mission. I can't tell you why. I mean, I knew it was an important mission. We had gotten bin Laden. This was incredibly important to bring him to justice after what had happened on 9/11. But personally, I didn't internalize it. It wasn't until About 6 or 7 months later, and I was invited up to New York to speak to the Federal Law Enforcement Association. 2,000 cops, marshals, Secret Service, great folks out of New York, and they were so appreciative of what the force had done to get bin Laden, and you could see the pain and the emotion and the relief about bringing him to justice. And it was then, and really only then, that I began to appreciate in the fullest sense the impact of the mission. But I tell you, in the day we were doing the mission, and frankly for most of the days afterwards, because I was running so fast I had to go back, I had to testify, I had to kind of finish up things, there wasn't a whole lot of jubilation. There was this sense that we had done what we said we were going to do, the boys got home safely, and that was the thing that we got the mission accomplished and the guys got back home safely. That was what I wanted to get done. Well, again, thank you all for having me here tonight. Thank you very much. It's been great to be here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Real quick, before we dismiss to the ice cream social, I have a few thank yous to give. If you don't know me, my name is Trey Book, and I'm the student body president and student regent for the university. First, I want to say thank you to the Presidential Lecture Planning Committee for their diligent work in preparation for tonight's event. Also, a special thank you to Dr. Bob Jackson for all of his hard work and dedication to making sure this night was special for us all. Thank you to David Hayden and the Horticulture Club for designing the flowers and the greenery you see on the stage tonight. And also a very special thank you to Admiral McRaven for spending this evening with us. We have greatly enjoyed speaking and listening to you. Thank you also for your countless years of dedicated service to our country. So it is my great honor to be able to stand here tonight and present you a gift on behalf of the student body here at Murray State. I, along with some football players from our team, would like to present you a number 36 Murray State football jersey in honor of your father. My pleasure. Now I would like to invite you all and remind you all about the dessert reception in Pogue Library, which is outside the front doors here to the left, kind of diagonal to us here. Once again, thank you all for attending. Have a safe, warm night, and God bless the racers.